It was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the First Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words, "In God we trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the President is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the President is President of the Corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen and whose land is called Crown Land, The United States is just another crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, the obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square. In the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington.
City/the
London and the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia.
What do London, Vatican City, and Washington, D.C. all have in common? Well, quite a few things, actually. These are different branches of control for the world elite to enforce a one world, new world order. London is the world financial center, Vatican City is for world religion, and Washington, D.C. is for the military. You can also see each entity has an Egyptian obelisk within their centers. This actually is the sexual organ of the false Egyptian god Osiris. In Washington, D.C. and Vatican City, they also have a dome close by which represents the pregnant stomach of Isis, another Egyptian false god. When ceremonies are done at the Capitol building or Vatican City, the occultists who have worked their way into the systems believe that they are calling forth Apollo to be resurrected. That's why the presidential inauguration and announcing of the new pope are done by these two structures. It's to enact a type of ritual in which their goal is to have Apollo birthed through the obelisk and pregnant stomach dome. The occultists in control are hoping to fulfill Revelation 9:11, which states, "And they had as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon, or Apollo."
And I just looked it up. The Statue of Liberty was given to America in 1886, 5 years before they decided to start this corporation. Interesting. So, one more question. The United States was a privately held company.
Yeah, United
Still
States.
Is it still?
Still is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, still is a privately owned company. Not the United States of America, not the 50 states collectively. The 50 states collectively, that's the republic. The United States of America Republic has
Which was
nothing to do with that at all.
1776. No,
they're
I'm talking about...
they're still in the republic.
Okay, the United States Corporation,
Oh,
which
yeah,
we are all pretty much
part
all
of.
employees of, citizens
That's right.
of. That is still a privately held corporation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
Is there records?
Well, of course there's records.
Where are they? How would we find that out?
Google.
Google, I doubt it.
It's all out
Google.
there. It's on Google.
Come on.
Look at all you have to do is go on the web and type in. Now just listen to the words I'm using. Write down the words I'm using, and start it with. Look at. I'm not putting myself out there on the air talking about BS. Go on the web and type in this. Write this down and listen to what I'm saying. Go on the web and type in US. Then VS, Victory Service. VS, Victory and Service, or VS, okay? US, VS, USA. So it's United States versus the United States of America. US versus USA.
Here it is right here. In
Yeah.
1871, Congress did expressly incorporate the District of Columbia. But the District of Columbia and the United States are not one and the same.
That's right.
As in Act of 1871, Congress also extended the United States Constitution into District of Columbia. Actually, if you want to
But
Google,
you'll see there's two different constitutions.
correct.
There's a Constitution of the United States, and there's a Constitution for the United States. The Constitution of the United States of America, or the Constitution for the United States. One is of the United States of America, and the other is for the United States. Of and for are two different words. Two different constitutions. They read almost identically the same, but there's been a couple of little words changed in one. The corporation has changed a few words. But that's all right. It's okay to do that because nobody reads in.
And I just looked it up. The Statue of Liberty.
Okay, so in part 1 through 4, what is a state national? I expose where all these came from, how they apply to us right now, and what's going on in our country right now. A lot of people don't know that our country is really members of the Union States. That's why it's called United States. It's united, but the states retain their sovereignty. The sovereignty is the Republic of Colorado, the Republic of Texas. The land itself was sovereign, and they came together called members of the Union. You've heard of this. The knowledge was taken by the same people that did all this. I share this all the time. John D. Rockefeller created the General Education Board in 1903. That's why you don't know about it. Same people pulling the same string. Control the mind, control the people. I want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. So it's not your fault you don't know, but it's only you that can exercise your free will and be the change you want to see, right? So here's your right. Only you can exercise this right, self-determination. Self-determination denotes a legal right of people to decide their own destiny in the international order. Self-determination is a core principle of international law arising from customary international law. Did you know in court, all international laws must be recognized under judicial notice? A judicial notice in court, it cannot be ignored if it's a fact. International laws are a fact. It's just a process. International treaties, like the treaties that the Moorish have in their history that they can pull up. You have a right of self-determination. Check this out. Consent of the governed. Right there. Where have you heard that from? It's what you celebrate every 4th of July. Consent of a governed is a phrase based upon the principle of self-determination. It's based upon that principle. Let me show you where this is from. So in the Declaration of Independence, which is what you celebrate every 4th of July, right? Is what it says. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? To secure these rights, government are instituted among men deriving its just powers from the consent of the governed. You see that? Consent of the governed right there. Consent of the governed derives from self-determination. You just didn't know that you could self-determine back to your nationality of the republic that you're born in. You don't have to be a corporation, a U.S. corporate citizen of Washington, D.C. I just showed you. Government does drive its power from us. There's a couple places you can see it that still exists that they couldn't take away, like the juries. Like the jury has the right to interpret law as it sees fit. It can disregard law and it can find someone not guilty. That's the sovereignty of the people. It just doesn't really exist anymore. That's why you can be overtaxed, overregulated. This is why we self-determine as a state national. It means you claim your nationality from the state you're born, which is found in the government styles manual. I show that in previous videos all the time.
Called by the Empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, the obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square.
City is for world religion, and Washington, D.C. is for the military. You can also see
Most people don't realize Washington, D.C. is not a part of the United States.
There are 3 corporations disguised as cities that run the world: District of Columbia, London, and Vatican City. London is not a part of the UK, and the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. is not a part of the United States. Vatican City is not a part of Italy. Together, they control politicians, courts, educational institutions, food supply, natural resources, foreign policies, economics, media, and the money flow of most nations, as well as 80% of the world's entire wealth. The Queen of England referred to the City of London Corporation as the firm, but it is known as the Crown. Washington, D.C. is not a part of the USA. District of Columbia is located on 10 square miles of land. D.C. has its own flag and own independent constitution. This constitution operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori. D.C. Constitution has nothing to do with the American Constitution. The Acts of 1871 passed by Congress created a separate corporation known as the United States and a corporate government for the District of Columbia. Thus, D.C. acts as a corporation through the act. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, the stars denoting D.C., Vatican, and London. Vatican City is not part of Italy or Rome. The Vatican is the last true remnant of Roman Empire. The State of Israel is also said to be a Roman outpost. The Vatican's wealth includes investments with the Rothschilds in Britain, France, and the U.S. with oil and weapons, owners of empire. The Vatican, the Crown, the District of Columbia. The City, London, Washington Monument, and Vatican.
Most people don't realize.
So look at CNN. They're gonna say some real good shit in here. Shit that I be getting in trouble for. But just tell me if you catch anything that's kind of very interesting. You should write down some stuff too. Check this out.
State of London and the Vatican, a 3rd city-state, was officially created in 1982. That city-state.
These 3 cities are Vatican City, the City of London, not Greater London, and Washington, D.C. Most people already know that Vatican City is not part of Rome or Italy, but most do not know that the City of London, that is the square mile within Greater London, is not part of Greater London or England, or that Washington, D.C. is technically not part of the United States, which it controls. The Vatican is the last true remnant of the Roman Empire, and since the City of London and later Washington, D.C. were both founded from Rome and use Roman law, then it can be argued that America, the British Empire, and the Catholic Church are all modern components of a covert Roman Empire and the extension of those ancient dragon bloodlines, and each plays an important role in the controlling of the world's population. Vatican City controls about 1/3 of the world through false religion and by intentionally concealing and obscuring the truth concerning both God and mankind's truly divine nature. The City of London controls the world financially through currency and banking. And Washington, D.C. is the strong arm and controls the world through brute military enforcement and wars. Let's briefly discuss each and their apparent dragon connections. The seed is the Vatican. The word Vatican itself comes from Latin and is a contraction of 2 words. Vatus meaning prophetic or diviner, and can meaning serpent or snake. These 2 words combined make the prophetic or made divine serpent. And since the Vatican is a place, you may say that Vatican means the place of the prophetic and worship serpent. And an attempt to translate divining serpent into everyday English, it seems to mean a spiritual serpent that is worshipped as God. The importance of the symbol of the dragon to the Catholic Church is unmistakable, as they are found to be prominently displayed in various locations throughout the Vatican, including the museum where the crest of the Vatican, the serpent dragon, or the pagan Babylonian god Marduk, is the oldest and central piece of their collection. Images of dragons can be found in other places on the grounds too, like the large one on the Vatican floor, or those that are intricately carved into the wooden panels on Vatican doors. Today, the Catholic Church is the biggest financial power, wealth accumulator, and property owner in existence, possessing more material wealth than any bank, corporation, giant trust, or government anywhere on the globe. The Pope, who is the visible ruler of this colossal global wealth, is one of the richest men on earth, and even though the Pope is said to be the holiest living human and God's representative on earth, the majority have not behaved that way. Most have participated in various wicked and twisted forms of debauchery. Like Pope John XII, who it is said that there is no sexual act or perversion he would not try. He not only consorted with the whores of Rome, but also with young boys and animals. Pope Clement II surrounded himself with little page boys in tunics cut off above their buttocks, allowing the Pope to fondle them from behind from time to time. Others murdered their opponents and resorted to bribery and racketeering. 2 consecutive popes, however, take the title for having the most debauched reigns. Pope Innocent VII and Pope Alexander VI not only did their fair share of torturing and killing, but also frequented in bribery, simony, and nepotism, while making a virtual whorehouse out of the Vatican that resulted in several illegitimate children. Since its inception, the Catholic Church has spent hundreds of years waging crusades and inquisitions, mercilessly murdering and annihilating all opposition and forcing their indoctrination at the tip of a blade, essentially saying, accept our version of God or go meet yours immediately. They hunted down, slaughtered, and systematically eliminated all heretics, pagans, and anyone else they believed may possess any understanding of ancient wisdom and spiritual truth, intentionally driving humanity back into the Dark Ages in order to essentially reset history as if we've never been advanced before. They only passed their ancient advanced knowledge down through various dragon-controlled secret organizations and attempted to repress publicly any advancement in spiritual or scientific thinking, like Galileo's heretical assertion, which was well known before by many ancient cultures, that the earth revolves around the sun. To ensure the masses' ignorance of the truth, they have stolen, suppressed, and even intentionally destroyed esoteric information and artifacts that they have decided not to keep for themselves. The Vatican's secret archives are estimated to have over 52 miles of shelf space, housing everything from Jerusalem temple artifacts stolen in 70 AD by the Romans to Mayan codices that only they kept copies of and had the rest destroyed in bulk by the conquistadors and priests. More modernly, the Vatican is engaged in a whole lot of unsavory acts, including helping organized crime gangs launder vast sums of money and being one of the only places to still offer banking services that Swiss banks can no longer do by law. At the end of World War II, the Vatican even helped smuggle Nazi war criminals out of their countries as part of Odessa, a secret organization for former SS members whose purpose was to establish and facilitate secret escape routes, later known as rat lines, to allow SS members to avoid their capture and prosecution for war crimes. Under the leadership of Pope Pius XII, also known as Hitler's Pope, the Vatican negotiated a concordat with Adolf Hitler, who was born and raised a Roman Catholic and portrayed his Third Reich as a Roman Catholic enterprise as part of the loosely formed Holy Roman Empire. Pope Pius XII, who is accused of forbidding monasteries and convents to shelter Jews and accepting loot stolen from the Nazis' victims, wrote a letter to Hitler saying, "To the illustrious heir Adolf Hitler, Führer and Chancellor of the German Reich, here at the beginning of our pontificate, we wish to assure you that we remain devoted to the spiritual welfare of the German people entrusted to your leadership. May the prosperity of the German people and their progress in every domain come, with God's help, to fruition." Many Jesuits became officers in the Nazi SS, and in fact the current Pope, Pope Benedict XVI, was himself a Hitler youth. These 3 cities,
London and the Vatican, a third city-state was...
London is the world financial.
The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the first Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers.
Has the UK got a finance curse?
Is it a trick question? Because the UK doesn't have...
Most people don't Most people...
The City of London is a unique place. It's the city, in a country that runs its government with perhaps the most complicated elections in the world, involving medieval guilds, modern corporations, mandatory titles, and fancy hats, all of which are connected in this horrifying org chart. Why so complicated? Though the new skyscrapers might make you think the City of London is relatively young, it's actually the oldest continuous government on the island of Great Britain. The City of London predates the empire that Victoria ruled, the kingdoms Anne united, and the Magna Carta that John reluctantly signed. While the London which surrounds the city only got to electing its first mayor in 2000, the list of mayors who've governed the City of London is almost 700 people long, going back more than 1,000 years. The City of London's government is so old that there's no surviving record of exactly when it was born. There are only documents, like the Magna Carta, which mention the pre-existing powers the City of London already had at that point in time. City of London...
What are we going to do now? Are we going to do another report, Senator?
There needs to be a lot more than reports, Jesse. People need to be prosecuted for this. The Clinton campaign and Hillary...
There are three...
Today we're going to tell you why we need restitution and reparation from the Roman Catholic Church. So, let's talk about how the Roman Catholic Church...
The city-state of London and the Vatican city-state of...
Try to imagine that all these obelisks were built on site. They were not gifts. They were already there. Try to imagine...
We're not walking too far. We're just right here at this hotel. And he said, well, what are you doing here? Because they were like from Guatemala and Honduras. And he said, well, church brought us a charity, NGOs, you know, and we didn't know that. And what that did is sparked up a storm, because when people found out that not only was that family there, but every single room had been rented out by this organization. It's a Catholic charity in McAllen. That led to us having to release this information to the citizens of La Jolla. But not only did that happen, we ended up finding out other mayors were calling, because they said, we have them in our hotels too. So then we found out that they were all along the valley.
So they've basically gone, these are people that have been turned over to the NGOs by Border Patrol?
Yes.
and they were going without telling anyone, renting out hotel rooms, whole hotels, with people that hadn't been tested for COVID, while we were all being forced to wear masks and told to get the vaccine.
Yes, and the scary thing was that at any given time, a family member could come and just pick you up. And since they had that document, that I don't remember, I think it's I-85, and you just showed it. You can go through the file or less. If there's too many, and you know the Border Patrol gets overwhelmed, what can they do if they don't have nowhere to put them? Release them to NGOs, or just release them flat out. Just go.
Wow.
You got to show up, and as soon as you go to your destination, you got to report to the ICE agents.
Welcome to DC. Welcome to DC. You know where you're at, the USA cap. You're taking it slightly. I'm taking it slightly. Now how you gon' act? Oh, you gon' be right back. Well, we gon' be right here. We gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. DC. You know where you're at, the USA cap. You're taking it slightly. I'm taking it slightly. Now how you gon' act? Oh, you gon' be right back. Well, we gon' be right here. We gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. DC, the home of Chuck Brown. Oh, you don't know the sound? Well, let me break it down. The G-O, the M-A, and B-O. See though, we've been pumping crank since an embryo, really though. It's the city where the people hold the power, and you can see 9 dimes every half an hour. Well, luncheon and Joe is the lingo, and brothers rob, so ain't nobody. Now how you gon' act? Oh, you gon' be right back. Well, we gon' be right here. We gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. I'm from the city to district. I own up to it. Scrimmages though. Lace up your Nike boots.